Welcome to our special council meeting. If you would all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Melanie, roll call.
Roll call. Councilmember Bolin.
Here.
Councilmember Colleton.
Here.
Councilmember Lang. Here. Councilmember Lassonde.
Here.
And Mayor Crowder.
Here. Okay, 2A, review and provide direction on Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Infrastructure Action Plan Amendment 3 alternatives. Mark.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor Crowder, Council. Thank you so much for the time today. It's my pleasure to present an update on our CDBG Infrastructure Action Plan with a plan to gear towards our third amendment in this action plan. And so with this item, I will be providing a background overview as well as a review of our action plan projects, reviewing existing conditions of our budget situation amongst the projects with a kind of a more deeper dive into the Row Road Extension projects phase 1 and 2. Then we've consolidated down to 4 kind of key alternatives that the council can consider as well as other ideas. And then we'll close with some recommendations and discussion on and next steps. I will note for the purposes of today's meeting, this is an information only item where we're looking for council direction to potentially bring it back at a future agenda item, but really no key decisions are being asked for being made today. All right, so when it comes to the general action plan, our CDBG DR action plan, and sometimes I'll refer it to as AP 1, 2, and 3, but this document aims to kind of formalize the context, approach, and overview of potential use of allocated funds. This is from our action plan. It says that we will revisit this action plan annually during our budget processing and then again as needed when critical issues develop requiring council action such as changes to our recommended project list. I mentioned earlier this is potentially our third amendment. So this item went before the council numerous times in advance of allocation of CDBG DR funds. And so in September of 2022, we adopted our original action plan that was modified in December of 2022 when some additional projects were awarded for funding, so we were able to kind of broaden our scope in the action plan. And then last January, Council adopted Action Plan Amendment 2, supplementing budgets as well as accounting for a new Row Road Phase 2 grant award. So now I'll give kind of some overview in how we got here as far as how these projects progress in disaster recovery. And so one key focus is to start with a baseline understanding of how these projects come about and how, and specifically these projects and the result of the 2018 Camp Fire was really guided by the setting of community priorities that goes through project scoping, and then we get to project design and implementation. So a good way to think about that in our context here is the presentation and adoption of the long-term recovery plan in 2019. And then in 2022, we adopted our transportation master plan after extensive community feedback and public input, scoping additional projects and providing budget estimates for those. And then once the CDBG DR funds were made available, and I'll have a little bit more about this later, we created an action plan again that governs how these funds are to be used on which projects. So first, kind of a good way to think about the long-term recovery plan, setting general priorities for transportation. This was kind of the charter of how staff and the community wanted to see projects move forward. And so for transportation projects that included missing road segments, long dead-end streets, safer streets, improved evacuation routes, as well as implementing, of course, the sewer project. And so those types of projects were identified in the long-term recovery plan, but they did not include preliminary cost estimates, let alone design cost estimates either. Then our transportation master plan kind of took that direction from the long-term recovery plan, and again, with extensive community input, we were able to scope additional projects with a better level of detail and provide overall cost estimates at that point in 2022. Again, those are preliminary cost estimates and have not gone through the benefit of designing these projects. And you can see on the left kind of the master list of overall projects that this document recommended after numerous public events and input on prioritization of those as well. So when it comes to the CDBG-DR infrastructure funding, in late 2021, we were issued how the funds were to be administered by HCD, Housing and Community Development, through the state, where as a result of the 2018 Camp Fire and other disasters in California, there was $317 million available. And our team had months to submit our notices of intent for projects that met certain eligibility criteria, having a tie back to the disaster, being a community need for long-term recovery, whether or not it met a national objective, being an urgent need or benefiting a low moderate income community. So with that, we submitted 60 total projects valued over $900 million, and Council adopted that prioritized list in February 2022 before submission. I mentioned about the number of projects and the value because ultimately the other communities, like Butte County for one, other distressed communities from the Camp Fire, as well as the Woolsey Fire, and I believe a couple of other events, there was a listing of eligible applicants, and all of these communities put forward their projects, and there was a distribution based on the community's unmet need that they were able to successfully submit through this program. So with that, out of the $317 million, the town was able to secure $199 million. And here on the right is just the first page of our council adopted list of projects that were prioritized based on the national objective, as well as the long-term recovery plan tier and project category, and then with, again, those project estimates. When it comes to developing projects, you can see, again, kind of going from concept to construction has quite a lot of steps along the way. We've used this slide in the past for the community to understand that when we talk about a project that is important but may have challenges down the road, and we're trying to investigate and determine the best fit for the project and go through environmental review and design, that there will always be council checkpoints for action, whether that's to change direction, pause the project, or continue forward. So a good way to think about going from concept to construction, everything in between before awarding a contract is an opportunity to estimate costs and pivot based on the findings, and this is to be expected. And then when it comes to your project cost certainty, you can see kind of this diagram. The further you go along on that, the more certainty you get as you get closer to construction. But again, at the end of the day, we are trying to put together a project that is going to be publicly bid and have a contractor commit to building that project design at a fixed price. Conversely, when you get to construction, after you've awarded that contract and you're going through 25 to 100% construction, cost overruns in this scenario have to be absorbed, and that's definitely a problem as well. We are aware that cost increases are certainly not desired, but there's a big difference between going through a design process where you're learning more about the project to find out what it's going to cost versus determining a contract price and then going through construction only to find major cost increases that have to be absorbed by the agency. Some key items of work of what goes into developing a project from concept through design. You have your survey work, whether that's right-of-way or actual physical survey mapping, your environmental between scoping, CEQA and NEPA compliance, geotechnical investigations, utility coordination, preliminary design, drainage, roadway design, your right-of-way assessments, title reports, owner exhibits, if there's acquisitions to be forecasted, and then all of those kind of get wrapped up into the design at the end of the project before we go out to bid. So when it comes to the town's approach and team that we've hired to kind of get us through this phase, or through these phases, the town relied on Mark Thomas, a firm that was really supporting the town in a major way and for disaster recovery support. They prepared our transportation master plan. They helped us scope and estimate some of these projects, or most of these projects. On our behalf, they helped us submit our notices of intent through the HCD CDBG-DR program. They submitted the railroad grant application for us through the LTCAP program, as well as the ATP grant applications that were also successful. When it comes to implementation of the projects, we've hired 3 specific firms to do that work. You'll see more about the individual projects and the team assigned to each project. But we've enlisted the services of Jacobs, Coastland, and Dockin Engineering. And their job, again, is to kind of go back to that previous slide of project management, environmental review, design, right-of-way, final design, to get us to bidding for construction for a team to be determined. So now I'll go ahead and walk through the review of the action plan projects. And this slide is based on the projects that the town undertook in disaster recovery and a kind of immediate response in implementation of repairs to our roads, which we are still funding for on and off system road rehab, the early warning sirens, our hazardous fuel reduction program, culverts, hardscape, sidewalks, and then signs. It should be noted here the match requirement at this point is up to about $25.6 million. And I bring that up because I do remember, and I know others will too, there was a day in disaster recovery for the town as an organization where we were really uncertain about the source of our matching requirements was going to come from to deliver basic recovery projects that not just put it back or that only really put it back to the way it was pre-fire, let alone deliver transformative infrastructure projects that really is more responsive to the long-term or community recovery plan that was adopted in 2019. And so after the town received its settlement, that PRO fund, that 10% project set aside, was really meant at its earliest days as a worst case scenario to have to fund these projects to fulfill these minimum match requirements. But obviously today, that is not the case. And so one of our first priorities in the CDBG-DR action plan is to use these funds to fulfill our local match requirements as much as practicable. Now getting to kind of the project by project listing, the Paradise Sewer Project, much has been covered on that in previous meetings. But at this point, we have secured $30 million in planning funds. That's separate than the the 199 million I mentioned earlier. The 15 million towards the sewer project does come from this pool of money for construction. It can be moved, most likely to design if needed, but that's not something that we're considering at this point, moving on with what we know. So pre-construction progress, again, we're at probably 33%. We had a previous cost estimate well over 400 million, and we have been pivoting towards a local option at a reduced cost with a phased approach. So that's to be determined on what we're targeting at this point. And I'll quick little plug, if you haven't taken our survey yet online, please do visit paradisesewer.com. Has 2 kind of foundational questions. And if you attended the special meeting on that and the community meeting, you probably already are aware. But again, we're also seeking additional input on kind of next steps in managing Paradise's wastewater. And so if you're looking at meeting with staff, there's also an invitation there for appointments to meet with staff and talk next steps. So with that, now back to the transportation projects. This is the railroad extension phase 1. I have kind of a band here of the project area, which its intent was to connect Pence Road to Sawmill, South Libby, and Edgewood. We have some leveraging funds on this project, about 1.8 million through congressionally directed spending, which was meant to kind of kickstart the environmental phase of the project. Right now we're about 5% pre-construction progress. Our previous cost estimate was about 66 million, and our escalated construction cost estimate at this point, or I should say all-in project cost estimate is $149 million. Phase 2 would pick up where Phase 1 ends at South Libby and connect over to Clark Road. This has significant leveraging funds through the Local Transportation Climate Adaptation Program. We received a $33 million award. We were the #1 ranking project in the state for this Phase 2. The pre-construction progress is again the same at about 5%, and the previous cost estimate was also $66 million, and our escalated cost estimate in 2032 would be $85 million. So this one really has a cost estimate associated with future escalation, but we also need to account for that as well. I'll talk about this more later this afternoon. There is a pending build grant application through the Federal Department of Transportation. We should hear back on that. It's to fund the final $25 million on this project before today's meeting. And so that'll become a little bit more clear later. Now, for the next project, kind of one that I anticipate the Pence Road projects will come before council next when it comes to implementation. These ones are a little bit further along. We're looking at a traffic signal at the intersection of Skyway and Pence. It's about 40% pre-construction progress. Our previous estimate was about $4.5 million, and our current estimate is about $5 million. And when I differentiate between the previous cost estimate, it's essentially the last time the action plan was adopted, and today what we are recommending to account for project, whether it's a formal estimate that we've received or when we're looking at the overall economy, understanding certain risks and potential for cost increases to try and give us a better level of comfort in the project budget using kind of these CDBG DR funds of what it would take to make sure that project is fully funded. Now, when it comes to the Pence Road widening projects, this is to construct a center two-way left turn lane, as well as the pedestrian mixed-use bike path, similar to what's already done in front of the school, but extend all the way up to Skyway and all the way south down to Pearson. So we do have a significant portion of the pathway components. That ATP means the Active Transportation Program. They've awarded $22.8 million towards this project to fund the portion of the path. Our widening is lagging a little bit behind on progress for design, but the pathway is well on its way at 75% complete. Our previous estimates for the widening were about $51 million and then $23 million for the bike path. Our current estimate, we found that this one was actually overestimated, and so our team is advising that $26 million for the widening will be more than sufficient, as well as $25 million for the bike path. So there is good news here that there is some budget savings in this project that could be reallocated to others. Next, I'll pivot to Skyway. Skyway widening between Billy and Wagstaff. This also has leveraged funds of Active Transportation Program funds for path and sidewalks. Pre-construction progress is 5%. The previous cost estimate for the widening was $15 million. We'd like to increase that to $17.5 million. For the bike path and the sidewalks, $6.8 million was the previous cost, and based on what we're seeing and potential estimate increases going up to 13.5 for that one. So for the next project, our Neil Road Pathway, this was also received a grant to fund the bike path on the west side of Neil Road between Skyway and town limits. The project pre-construction progress is about 50%. Our previous cost estimate is about $13 million, and our current cost estimate is about $18.3. For the Elliott Nunnally extension, we have no leveraging funds on this project. It has not started. We have not been able to issue a task order on this project, and our previous cost estimate through the original scoping was about 7.5. At this point, based on the bridge that would be required to extend either Elliott or Nunnally, using cost estimate increases, kind of a cost per mile approach, of what we're seeing on the Row Road projects, we're estimating about $55 million for this project. And so between the community impacts of the neighborhoods in the area, as well as the significant cost increase of what was originally forecasted, in all alternatives and discussions, we are recommending that this one be postponed indefinitely until we are able to secure project-specific funding at a future date. When it comes to the Oliver Curve pathway, we have some leveraging funds, about $450,000 of congestion mitigation air quality funds have been allocated to advance environmental and design. We're about 50% through that phase. Our previous cost estimate was 13.1. Our current cost estimate is 21 million, though I'll also share that the difference between these two cost estimates also represents an increase in scope. You'll notice some of the references to the Oliver project mentioned phase 1, which was originally just from Skyway to Billy. We've submitted this project for multiple project applications in the active transportation program, and in fact you can see here below 4 different times. And between the third and the fourth cycle, we received some feedback that it would be better if the project connected to the park. So we did submit that and have it connect onto the park and really have the bike path go from Oliver between Skyway and Billy, and then Billy to Cliff, connecting to Billy Park. And so unfortunately it was still not funded. There is options to phase this project again and cut it down to a minimum priority if that was the desire of the council or the community. But at this point it has, it has very minor and spent CMAQ funds. We are pretty much saying that at a minimum the project is, at the base phase for the Oliver portion, probably in the range of $10 million. But the current cost estimate to proceed with this scope would be about 21 million. If we don't phase it or fund it with CDBG-DR, based on the feedback we're getting in the active transportation program, it really should be expected that we should fund it locally or postpone it indefinitely. Next, I'll pivot to the Foster and Black Olive intersection improvements. Considering a variety of different solutions, trending most likely to a traffic signal at that location, has no leveraging funds, 5% pre-construction progress. Our previous cost estimate was 3.5 million. Our current cost estimate is 4.5 million. The next project would be the Forest Service Road improvements at the top end of town to extend Forest Service Road to have an outlet, whether it's to emergency vehicles only or through traffic. Would be to convert a private road into a publicly owned and maintained road with an outlet for either, again, emergency or through traffic. I'm sorry, this is an error. There are no leveraging funds on this project. I'll just make that edit right now. No. Okay, thank you. Okay, we have not started on this one. It does not have a task order issued to a consultant yet, and our previous estimate was 3 million, and based on, again, some of the other numbers, we're applying a $10 million budget for this one to make sure it's deliverable within that budget. All right, so moving right along, we'll go to kind of a summary of existing conditions. Understanding council critical priorities, we have based kind of our recommendations and presentation of information here that we are trying to use CDBG-DR funds to fulfill our normally required local matching projects, for our road rehab and those other ones that we listed. And then our next priority is to deliver council prioritized listing of projects which address the long-term recovery plan objectives, and then obtain and implement leveraging funds to ensure that we are delivering the projects to the highest benefit as possible. So the need for Action Plan Amendment 3 can be kind of summarized as follows. If you look at this exhibit, which shows all of the projects I just summarized, as well as a listing in the upper left of where kind of the biggest allocation of match projects or the sewer project are up here in the upper left. Sewer project, road rehab, hazard mitigation match, FEMA match, and FHWA match, and then you have the physical location of every project I just covered shown on this exhibit. So the reason why we're recommending an adjustment today is because we have some challenges. First of which, we have a budget surplus on the Pence Road project. We've continued to see cost challenges for the sewer project. Right now, the construction phase is entirely unfunded, and we don't even have a target of what phase one could be. But we do know every additional dollar we gather and we dedicate to the sewer project is $1 closer to delivering that project. The road projects combined underfunded $130 million, including a pending $25 million build grant application. So obviously that's not ideal, but again, as we're looking at doing something that's never been done before, building a bridge in Paradise, where currently we have none, these are big projects, and so that one really is surprising at how much, but based on how little we knew when we set out to start this conversion from a concept to a constructible project, it shouldn't be too surprising considering the changes specifically in the construction cost industry. Elliott Nunnally cost increase, again, I will be the first to say it appears that the original estimate for that project did not include a bridge at all. And based on our review, there's no way to cross either to extend Nunnally or Elliott without a bridge. I already mentioned the impacts to the community and the neighborhood areas that would be expected with that. And then obviously with that type of budget increase is going to be very difficult to construct without some new funding. I already covered that the Oliver Curve leveraging ATP grant was not awarded for the 4th time. And then last month, we kind of provided an update based on our off-system road rehab improved projects. Costs were trending a little bit up, although our most recent bid award did come under. So we're recommending an augmentation of $2.5 million to make sure that the town's general fund is not impacted on delivering the match of the off-system paving project. And then so everything else is essentially, again, an opportunity to make sure that when we go through this adjustment and resetting of projects, that the projects we do choose to deliver can be done so with confidence as we go through design. So we have adjusted project costs to, again, account for inflation and industry cost increases accordingly. So our approach to Action Plan Amendment 3, we are recommending adjust CDBG-DR allocation to, number 1, fulfill our matching funds requirements for projected final costs, deliver heavily leveraged projects along key evacuation routes, and then our goal is to review alternatives for remaining projects to meet as many community objectives as possible, including potentially allocating additional funds to the Paradise Sewer Project. So if you look over here to the right, you can review those 3 priorities with kind of the projects that I'm referring to underneath each one. So the match requirements we've covered, the heavily leveraged projects, our Pence Road corridor, our Skyway corridor, and our Neal Road project. Then you look at kind of the purpose of today's meeting and community input and council discussion. We're really trying to decide what does priority 3 look like if we can affirm these first 2 priorities. What does this 3rd one look like, and what should we do moving forward? So with that in mind, I modified that map that I previously showed to lock in the kind of projects in red as we have this discussion, and the budgets that I'm showing and the alternatives being analyzed. Let's all have the same understanding that these really kind of 3 foundational projects of Pence, Skyway, and Neal Road are, again, ones that need to have their budgets adjusted, and the commitment to deliver those needs to remain. And so everything presented from here moving forward assumes those projects are made whole to account for all of the cost increases we are seeing, as well as the teams that we've hired to deliver them, and that we can do that with confidence moving forward, as well as our match projects. That said, if the council or community does want to pivot and change priorities amongst these projects, that's certainly within our abilities to do so. Now to talk more in depth about the Road Phase 1 and 2 updates, I will cover that. So an overview of the Road Extension Project. It was identified in our Transportation Master Plan as a top priority of the town to address the highest concentration of transportation-related fatalities associated with the 2018 Camp Fire. This project is consistent with the 1994 general plan and adds additional east-west connector to evacuation routes of Pence, Clark, Neal, and Skyway. Our original fact sheet has showing phase 1 and future phases here, but it really can be split into 5 phases. The first being Pence to South Libby, the second being South Libby to Clark, third being Clark to the current terminus of Row, and then fourth being Neal Road to Skyway, and fifth finally being the kind of widening of the existing Row Road between Neal and the existing terminus. I'll note here the alignments shown on this fact sheet are not selected. This green dotted line with the arrows, I understand that looks like an alignment. And our future exhibits will be clear, and you can see that in the presentation of kind of the more brackets showing the start and ending point. But certainly when we look at a project to add a new road between two places that don't exist, there's a whole process to go through to understand what is the start and end point, as well as what's the best and least impactful alignment to do that, and they'll allow an opportunity in the environmental review phase for neighboring properties to participate, provide their input, what we like, what we don't like, and then we make a consideration. None of that activity has occurred yet on the Row Road Phase 1 project or Phase 2 project. So again, I'll kind of highlight that we are still dealing in concept based on the project progress, but there is significant increases to the Phase 1 especially. Our previous cost estimate I mentioned was $66 million. Our escalated cost increase of 2032 at 149. I will note, though, we are certainly targeting a construction date ahead of 2032, as well as Phase 2, previous estimate 66 million, current estimate of 85. And so you can see kind of the brackets between the start and end points of what we've committed to do as of today. Quickly, I'll go through a comparison a little bit deeper, and I just ask that you hang with me a little bit, as this does kind of have a little bit more complexity between the two phases and what's within our ability to choose and what would have some kind of larger ramifications if we made edits. So for Phase 1, I mentioned it's a new roadway connecting Pence, Edgewood, Sawmill, and South Libby. It has the 1.8 million in congressionally directed spending. The original estimate is 66 million. The scope on this project is more flexible as the primary funding is CDBG DR, where we have great partners in HCD, and they understand that these are the community's projects, and what the community wants to see is what we'll do. And so if we need to make edits on the scope to this one, it's a little bit easier to do so because we're working within our allocation that by design is flexible. So that's good news. When it comes to Phase 2, it's a new roadway connecting South Libby to Clark. I mentioned we have that 33 million in local transportation climate adaptation program funds. That is administered by the California Transportation Commission. It's a competitive process. We also have a $25 million pending Raise Build grant application at the federal DOT level. The town actually did decide to dedicate 3.8 million of our local pro funds for the build match, and so that's something we're keeping a close eye on. We should understand if that project will be awarded, or at least that application will be awarded in June. I mentioned our original estimate. The scope on this one is less flexible as the competitive grant awards have been made across the state through this LTCAP program. And so I'll mention again, for both of these, the alignments have not been selected. Now, when we look at the Row Road Extension Phase 1 project estimate at concept with our grants team, they developed this estimate in conjunction with, again, 59 other projects that were done in a very short amount of time with a solid effort. But obviously, we are disappointed that this project estimate is obviously very under budgeted. They use their experience with similar projects, and is at this stage again very common to make assumptions of unit costs. And so we ended up with an estimate at this point for this earlier estimate at 60 million, which the town along the way increased as funds were available in the other action plan amendments. And so as we are today with our Jacobs team, When we look at this, we have, again, a higher estimate of the base construction costs and then the escalation. So pretty much getting to the total project cost, including design, right-of-way, and construction engineering, we're at $143 million, and if you escalate that at 3% per year over the next 7 years, that's where the $178 million comes in. But again, the Jacobs team in their time, a short amount of time working on this project, has certainly put in a lot more effort to have a better understanding of the scope and the complexity and just how long of a bridge this could be to connect from Pence to Edgewood. And you're just kind of seeing a quick analysis or screenshot of all the different alignments that could be evaluated if the project were to move forward. So to break those two estimates down in a little bit more detail, but also still a very high level, there's some kind of 4 things that stand out for me is, estimate of mobilization, drainage, bridge, and concrete costs, but most importantly, that bridge. The original bridge estimate from the Mark Thomas team was estimated at $12 million, where currently the unit costs are much higher with the Jacobs estimate at $58.2 million. So much, much higher. When moving on to options, so from here, I'll kind of draw a line without having the green slide to kind of transition to my next thought, is if the town does want to proceed with the Row Road project, is that there are options, which is great, a great place to be. One approach would be to divide Phase 1 into 2 phases on its own. Phase 1A being connecting Edgewood, South Libby, and Sawmill, and then Phase 1B, which could be deferred, would be connecting Edgewood to Pence. And so if we defer Edgewood to Pence in that bridge, we have a revised project cost of only $22 million, and that those project savings could be reallocated to Phase 2 and other projects, and it allows for the alternative analysis of additional alignments between Edgewood and South Libby. And so one thing we could look at, instead of just trying to connect the terminus of Edgewood, South Libby, and Sawmill, we could look at maybe a midpoint connection with different options to get from Edgewood over to South Libby. And then if Phase 2 is constructed, the outlet would be out to Clark Road at some alignment to be determined. But this kind of a graphic here on the right just shows, again, we would have options. We feel confident that Phase 1A could be delivered with an estimate of $22 million at this point. So I'll go ahead and keep on going. So if you compare what I previously showed as the comparison of what Phase 1 would look like with what we're recommending, is we would delete the connection to Pence Road. Our revised estimate is $22 million, and we still need to select an alignment. Here on Phase 2, if we, again, move some of those project savings into Phase 2, we would not be dependent upon that build grant that we're supposed to hear back on in June. And so if that was awarded, say we go down this road, if that was awarded, that $25 million in build funding could be used on this project, and then we take the CDBG-DR and then revisit this action plan amendment and allocate it to another priority. So again, the $25 million would be pending. It would not be required for delivery. That match for that build grant is still committed, but again, if the build is not needed or used, we can revisit whether or not that project needs the $3.8 million of local funds. And I already mentioned we could prepare a new action plan amendment 4 to reallocate the savings again if that grant was awarded. Our revised estimate is $85 million. So now, again, thank you for the patience, and I know there'll be plenty of time at the end of the presentation for questions. And I have a lot of information. I try to get a lot available here to you in the presentation, but I'm hoping to have access to information that you might have questions on, and glad to work through, creative ideas and hear public feedback on what to do. But when we try and look at big transformative decisions like this, a really goal here is to provide options. Again, these are your options, not ours. And so if there's something you like or don't like, or a part of this or part of that you like, all of that's on the table. The presentation of alternatives 1 through 4 with a recommendation are to just really start that conversation and lead us down a path that you see best fit. So when we move on to the first alternative, I kind of have in bold at the top is just kind of, if I were to summarize it very, very quickly, going forward with the revised Railroad Phase 1A and delivering the Oliver Curve project. And so here on all of these graphics on the left, what I've done is I've screened out the projects that would be suspended indefinitely, and I've kept the normal coloring of just the black and white and the thick black lines for the projects under this alternative that would be adjusted for the economy and cost increases and fully funded and delivered under this alternative. So for alternative 1, that would deliver the Railroad Phase 1 and keep the $33 million of LTCAP funds. I'm not sure if I mentioned, well, I'll mention that here in a couple of alternative 3. Delivers Oliver Curve pathway as it's currently scoped to Cliff Drive, increases funding to the Neal, Skyway, Pence, road rehab, and other match projects. It maintains the current $15 million allocation to the sewer construction, and it would suspend the Elliott Nunnally extension. It would suspend the Foster Black Olive project. It would suspend the Forest Service Road extension indefinitely. This table is in your agenda packet as well. The goal of this is to show kind of the accounting of our project costs, our leveraging funds, our progress, what we said in Action Plan Amendment 2, where the funds would go, and look at the unfunded portion of the project, what we are recommending under this alternative, the net change, and then ultimately here at the right, understanding post-Action Plan Amendment 3, is this project fully funded? And so the goal, besides the sewer, is to end up with a bunch of projects down here that say yes. And the ones that say no, here at the bottom, we are recommending, again, those be suspended. So this is the spreadsheet that helps us differentiate between the alternatives on a financial accounting perspective. When we look at alternative 2, it's essentially the same thing as alternative 1, but instead of delivering the Oliver Curve pathway, it would be to suspend that indefinitely and take those savings and allocate it towards the sewer project. Every project that's on this list has merit and warrants, very serious consideration. And this alternative, again, is trying to help move the needle on the sewer with a little bit of additional funding as we try and track towards our Phase 1. Certainly open to suggestions and modifications to all of these alternatives, but this one, if we're looking between the costs of everything else, trying to address based on the council prioritized list, if there was one to come off in addition to the 3 that were off on alternative 1 and go towards the sewer, the Oliver Curve was the next one. And so that's another option. Here's what that project would look like. And so again, I'll point out here, this priority is straight from the council adopted resolution of the project prioritization process. And again, it shows Elliott Nunnally, Oliver Curve, Foster Black Olive, Forest Service Road. So of our kind of foundational 9 projects, it would alternative 2 essentially postpones 6, 7, 8, and 9. Alternative 3, this is where we get into potential consideration of postponing Railroad Extension Phase 1 and 2 entirely. There's pros and cons to that. Obviously, the cons being that the project isn't delivered. This was identified as a major priority for the community, and we've made commitments to other funding agencies that this is also a priority for us to deliver with their funds. And so with that, it would increase the allocation. If we postpone the railroad extension projects, we could increase the sewer allocation by $57 million. It would deliver the Oliver Curve pathway, deliver the Foster Black Olive, deliver the Forest Service Road extension, increase all of the budgets, and still suspend the Elliott Nunnally project. One thing I'll mention here, if it didn't show earlier on a slide, that if the town is to consider returning the $33 million award to the State Local Transportation Climate Adaptation Program, that would have very serious impacts to our credibility, our reputation as a region for statewide funds to go to Butte County, and then also would significantly hamper our ability to obtain funds, and we could possibly even be excluded or graded down in future program funding cycles in that effort. So it's certainly not something that should be done lightly, but it doesn't mean that it's not an option for the town to consider, because if you are gathering here in this presentation, I hope that this is globally, our recovery is very, very challenging from so many different lenses, whether it's constructing homes or building infrastructure, that is all about trying to find the best match between priorities and funding available. And so that's essentially why this alternative is here, is to understand what the council's priorities are in this new kind of 2025 reset. Here's what that would look like from a financial perspective, striking essentially priority 2 between phase 1A and phase 2, and alternatives, or project number 6, the Elliott Nunnally extension. And you can see we have a good distribution of everywhere else, and then that funding for the sewer goes from 15 million up to 72 million. Alternative 4, the last one, would be to postpone the railroad projects 1 and 2 and increase the sewer by 92 million. This is really kind of the opposite of phase, or alternative 3, where we deliver kind of those secondary projects, where this one pretty much says, we're only going to do Pence, we're only going to do Skyway, and we're only going to do Neil, and everything else in the town's kind of work plan at this point is suspended until further notice, and all the funds that remain go to the sewer. So this would increase the sewer funding by 92 million if that option was chosen, and again, still has the same very serious impacts if those funds are returned. And here's what that would look like from the table perspective. Now, to close for staff recommendations, I've kind of outlined a few notes for discussion for me to remember. Current estimates could increase or decrease again in the future as the design progresses. Again, a lot of these projects you saw are very early, and we have a very uncertain economy. And so what construction costs are going to be in 2028 can be planned for, but some of the cost increases we've seen over the last 10 years even far exceed our expectations. And so I don't want to rule out, though I think we've appropriately planned for, cost increases in the future. Weighing transportation projects against sewer funding is difficult. Prior action plans anticipated additional state funding for the sewer, which has not come to fruition. The right-of-way phase of work has not started for our new infrastructure projects. I anticipate the Pence Road corridor will be the first where council will see some of that here in the coming months. On that project alone, we have, I believe, over 80 right-of-way needs from individual owners along that corridor. Now, most of them are very, very small slivers, but there will be significant partnership opportunities needed between the town and property owners that front these roads. And so I really bring that up because the public sentiment for certain projects will vary, especially for owners near project locations where road connectivity currently does not exist. We've seen that already. And so it's a good opportunity to consider that, expect it, and know that as we go forward, if we go forward in these projects, that the environmental review processes will consider public feedback and provide an objective analysis of all the impacts and mitigation measures. And then even at that point, council could still decide to proceed or not proceed with projects at the conclusion of the respective environmental documents. So what I'm trying to say is, if we go forward today, it doesn't mean that later down the road we may decide not to, based on what we know and determine what the public wants as the design and environmental review concludes. So just put together one more chart here of really just a recommendation for the decision-making process. Goal number 1, affirm the staff approach to matching and leverage projects. And then really kind of a fork in the road is to consider the railroad extension projects. If we would like to move forward, really, you could consider alternatives 1 and 2. And if you would like to go ahead and call it now and make those other supplemental appropriations, you'd be looking at alternatives 3 and 4. Once that decision is made, then you can consider the distribution of remaining CDBG DR allocation. At this point, staff is strongly recommending alternative 2, which ensures that the highest priority and most beneficial projects are fully delivered. It strikes a balance between the town's overall priorities for both sewer and transportation projects in accordance with the long-term recovery plan. And so that one's there. As far as schedule, again, I'll close that we are not looking for action today, though indication of preference would be helpful for public review and comment. Please do advise if additional information or materials are necessary. We are looking for this item to return on the April 8th regular council meeting for adoption of the Action Plan Amendment 3, whatever that may be. It's important that we keep this process as quick as possible so that we can continue with our budget preparation for fiscal year 25-26, commence coordination and implementation of council decisions with appropriate funding agencies, and then as you saw, we have a lot of consultant teams really standing ready to either continue implementing their work or needing to pivot. So that's really important. Okay, with that, I want to say thank you to the council again for listening to me for almost an hour. I'm glad to get your feedback, obviously public comments, and talk next steps.
I have a quick question. It sounds to me like the bridges are all going to Pence. Nothing going to Clark or Skyway requires a bridge.
Actually, that's not true. Sorry, let me be better at that. So I'll pull up this memo, working with the kind of railroad corridor. And so we would need 2 bridges, though on phase 2, our budget is looking much more closer to reality than obviously phase 1. And so,
I don't know what that just meant.
sorry, let me pull up a picture here. Okay. Okay. Going to zoom out. I'm sorry. Let's see if I can not crash the computer during a council meeting. It's not liking what I'm doing. Let me give it a second.
I know that feeling, so.
Yeah. Okay, we're getting closer. All right, so a couple of options for Railroad Phase 2 would be a bridge at the extension of Bennett Road if it were to just continue westward. And then another alignment would be if Railroad was to kind of arc north along its current curvature and some potential right-of-way acquisitions in this area and leveraging existing county, newly discovered town property, and then a potential connection here up north near Community Parkway.
And you've come up with a cost on those?
What's that?
You have an approximate cost on those?
Yes, so at this point, when I refer to phase 2, it does include that 85 million that's in this action plan amendment to look at this lower cost alternative of this alignment.
Okay.
Yep. And so you can see kind of the plan and profile or profile view of this bridge if that was selected along this curve. And then obviously if we were to just, cut across the canyon and connect to American Way, we are talking a very significant bridge.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Have you considered on the Oliver curve busting up into a 1A and a 1B like you talked about the railroad, where 1A would just be the curve? Because that's my number one concern. It's the safety issue.
Yeah.
I get why we're doing the whole thing, and I encourage that somewhere down the road. But my biggest concern is the traffic that goes up and down, especially the construction traffic when it's coming down, when there's a pedestrian going up the road or a kid going to the grocery store or whatever. There's no escape there. There's not an ability for them to duck to the right or left, because you just have the hill on the right side and you got the drop off on the other side.
I would agree. let's see. So I will pull up the quick map and just drop a pin here so we could look at the Oliver curve. So your question is, can we go ahead and, reduce the overall scope of the Oliver Curve project and just construct pedestrian improvements along the outside barrier of this curve so that, folks could walk from Skyway to Valley View?
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the only area that I'm concerned about from a safety perspective.
Yes. That certainly is within our abilities to prioritize that reduced project to address that goal, yes. As far as mending it or merging it with an alternative, that's going to be somewhere between alternatives 1 and 2.
Yeah.
I'd be glad to find out more about that number, but at this point, I would say it's, not going to be the 21 million,
No.
but it's probably not going to be less than 10.
Okay.
So because this is a significant retaining wall that's needed on the outside of that curve. And so I would easily say that it's likely that we could get it in there for less than 10 million.
Yeah, okay. I'm not trying to be dramatic, but I'd hate to be at this council when we find out that some child that was walking up there got hit by a car because we didn't think about this ahead of time. I see that fairly regularly where people are, children are riding their bike up that road, or just yesterday I saw, a couple days ago, I saw a lady coming down it with a little carriage behind it that had her child in that, and it's just, there's no escape on that, that curve area.
Yep, I understand. Very familiar with the alignment, and I recognize also, and evidenced by our desire to seek external funds to build this.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad to take direction, however that may be.
The council as a whole, but that,
Yep.
you know my point of view on that.
Yes.
So, Mark, I kind of have some concerns overall here. When we chose these projects, we hire these architectural firms or engineering firms to give us cost analysis, so we make decisions based on that. And I understand inflation, but on a lot of these, it's more than inflation that's in here. The bridges, I saw in the report that they were made undersized. Well, how does an engineer do that? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just, and my first experience with this was the sewer project, and now I'm seeing more, and it's really concerning to me, and it's making it's going to make it really harder in the future to okay these plans, because it's going to be, is it real or not? And it's really troubling to me. All these were good, projects and needed projects. Obviously, we don't have the funding for them all. But us missing so bad like this, it's troublesome, and I don't, the engineering firms, they're not doing it for free. We're hiring them to do it. And I guess I expect better information from them than what we're getting. If they're missing this bad, there's an issue, and they shouldn't be working for us. It's really, really troublesome. There's also a question I have. It was 14A on the agenda, on the item, and it was something about CDBGR funds for match are contested. Can you explain that to me, and why it was contested and how much money we're talking about?
Yeah. So which page is that one?
Page 54.
Okay. So this has been a long, sorry,
I think it's
54?
It's item 14.
34, isn't it?
Oh,
35. Okay. Oh, yeah. So this has been an issue we've been advocating for a solution on and a remedy for literally years. Because at the start of this, we were told that CDBG-DR could be used on all projects that have federal matches in disaster recovery, FEMA and other federal agencies. And so when we put that to the test and put forward our completed and underway Federal Highways Administration Emergency Relief Program projects, for the ones that broke ground before the NEPA was validated on the HUD side, and I know I'm speaking kind of federal speak here, those funds were initially rejected as being eligible because the work had already started before the funds were allocated and before the new funding colors environmental review was complete. And so that's been a major issue of ours and something that we've advocated in Washington, D.C. for, something that we've pushed against as a major issue for us. And so it was about $3.8 million total between the wide variety of projects, between road rehab, culverts, sidewalks, and others that these could potentially not be reimbursable. However, in the last month or so, I've learned that there was a legislation in the 2025, I forget the name of the bill, at the federal level that has provided HCD a pathway for these funds to be used, even though they had different environmental reviews. This is one of our, when we talk with other wildfire disaster affected communities on lessons learned and kind of problems that we see, is that the understanding of NEPA requirements between federal agencies is not necessarily the same. In fact, in some cases, it's very, very different. And so on road rehab, whether it's on or off system, we really had an appropriate review and came to the same conclusions. And it was good enough for CDBG-DR funds to be used on FEMA match, but not federal highways, even though federal highways is the grand authority of roads. And so that was a problem for us. We feel like it's solved at this point, and that's why there's positive news there at the end of that bullet point. But there was a time that we were very concerned that $3.8 million would not be reimbursable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome. And then, to the original point, I'm glad to accept displeasure, and I share that, and I take responsibility for everybody we hire and every work product we put forward before the community. What we really do want is to come through with what we said we would do. But at the same time, I do want to add a note that we hired Mark Thomas to do some really cutting edge work, high pressure, short timeline, major community input, scoping and estimating these projects at a level that I would describe, and I have described in meetings with you and the community, as napkin sketches of really trying to understand if we build a project that requires a bridge that connects something that never connected before, what could that cost? We do expect a level of accuracy, and certainly double is outside of that expectation, and it leads to disappointment. But this firm did amazing work for us, and they submitted, the 60 notices of intent that we as a staff at that time was likely, myself with a few other staff members could have never done alone. And if we don't use them and we don't go through all of this work in disaster recovery together, we wouldn't even have the $200 million to start with. And the 25.6 in match funds would still be unfunded. And so I don't love to come forward and say this project is more expensive than it originally set out to be at a concept level, but I can appreciate the fact that in order to provide an accurate estimate for a project that someone will build it for or estimated that could be built for in 5 years from now, a significant amount of work needs to take place and understand the conditions of the reality. Okay.
And I get that, but close is one thing. 3 times over is not even in the ballpark. It's like, when you're blindfolded and pinning the tail on the donkey, you're not even hitting the donkey.
Yeah.
And, that's just not, I did this for 25 years. And, not that I didn't miss, because I sure did, but never, ever this bad. And it just is, I'm just having a real hard time with as far off as these numbers are.
Yep.
And then we need to make sure we get better numbers than this before we present these projects to the council, to the community. Because I'll tell you, I'm tired of answering to the community about, our sewer and now these projects. That it's not okay.
Well, understand And these projects are, as you can see, even the sewer, these projects, this community, other communities, we are not alone and immune to this. But I will say, too, to your point, when it comes to our delivery teams, we are not, the firm that prepared these estimates are not one of our delivery teams. We currently don't have any active contracts with them. And so I hear everything you just said, though.
Thank you.
I got a couple of questions. One was on Steve's point, who's doing these estimates? Because what we learned on the sewer inside of a month or couple of years, the thing went crazy. So I really question these, because you're talking about numbers that you're projecting it 5 years from now, this is what the cost would be, and I understand the difficulty of something you've never done and all the complexity of this. But, some of these projects, like the Pence Road, well, first of all, on the connection, the Row Road idea. Row Road, if you drove Row Road around that big curve around there, it's a mess. And if you try to use that evacuation route in its current configuration and width, it's going to be difficult. But the Row Road extension to Pence Road, you said on both of these things, modified. What does that mean?
So modified means instead of connecting to Pence, that we would essentially start the project at Edgewood and
Okay.
connect to South
Okay,
Libby.
Yeah, it wasn't clear in the staff report. So, and that part I tend to agree with. The other question I had was on the Pence Road widening project. Is that to the town limit?
No, it's to Pearson project.
Okay,
or
there's
Pearson
the
Road.
problem. There's the problem. Now you're going to have 3 lanes coming to Pearson, and then it drops to 2 lanes with big 3-4 foot deep culverts on either side to the town limit. Then the county has repaved the road and it's relatively decent. So when you're going to try to funnel all this evacuation traffic, should we ever need it, you're going to choke it down to 2 lanes, where again, if somebody's car runs out of gas or there's some problem, boom, now you've got a big thing. So you're going to make this $160 million roadway from Edgewood or South Libby to Pence Road, and you're going to dump it out into those 2 lanes. It just doesn't make any sense to me. The better idea is to try to get from your modified plan from Edgewood, where 6 people died on that long dead end road, out to Clark, somehow, some way. I mean, that's a problem. This has always, for me, been kind of an idiot idea. I understand wanting to have the connectors, and I'm back in 2011, 10, Chuck Rowe was very favorable to the town, not Chuck Rowe, Chuck Horning, who owns a lot of the property to make a connector, was very favorable to the town and wanting to go and talk to the residents along Bennett to get that road opened up. And Chuck Rowe wouldn't allow it, and so he pulled all of his support and moved to Telluride. But if we apply common sense, which is difficult for government to do, trying to build a bridge and go to Pence Road and divert traffic there is kind of a stupid idea in my book.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Culleton. I will note that Row Road Phase 1A and Phase 2 is exactly what you just said, Edgewood to Clark.
And I mean, so that way, in the recommendations that you made, and I would hate to lose the $30 million or whatever it is we got, $33 million. I'd hate to lose that. But even if you just connect all of those roads, so if you lived on the end of one of those dead-end roads, you could at least get to another road to get out to Clark or to somewhere. That would be an improvement. And then I question, I'm not familiar, I'm not a hunter, so I haven't hiked down in these canyons, I didn't grow up and go to high school here where I went down there and searched for bottles or anything. But I just can't imagine, is there water in that canyon? Mm-hmm. Oh, there is? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, it just seemed, but trying to come in an American way on that connection, that's another kind of stupid idea, because now you got to build a great big bridge because the canyon's deeper, So I don't know, it's just like, good luck, I appreciate all you're doing, but man, this is a tough one. And I've heard from citizens that have different opinions about this. I'm one of the people that believes that, I believe a couple of things, and the fire department doesn't always tell you the truth, or the fire state people. You know, what happened to us in 2018, it won't happen in my lifetime again, and I doubt that it'll happen in even the youngest people's lifetime or grandkids' lifetime, because we have new building codes, we have new weed abatement things, we have a whole different way of dealing with where we live. And so those conditions will probably not ever exist again, where we'll have to evacuate 50,000 people. And we've been living this way on this ridge for all these years. So I think putting a sewer in so we can develop some commercial activity. If we don't have commercial regrowth in this community, we will die on the vine. We will be like we were in 2008 with a staff of 92 people and a budget of less than $8,000 million a year and going broke. So that's my 2 cents.
So, first off, Mark, I want to tell you, you know, whatever I say, it's not directed at you. And don't take it personal, but I'm
Yeah.
really frustrated with these engineering reports being so far off. And I'm having a hard time with it. I'm going to have a hard time in the future, you know, looking at these and accepting them. So anyway, but with that, I think let's move and get some public input. Ellie, how many cards do we have?
I have 5 right now.
Oh,
The first card is for Cliff Jacobson.
Good afternoon, council and Mayor Crowder and town staff. I'm going to try and stick to script here so I don't lose my 3 minutes. I reviewed the packet for today's council meeting, and I agree with staff that option number 2 is the most feasible option. Putting the town's wastewater issue above road improvements is logical, though. Pre-campfire escape routes were limited and should have been better. Post-fire, they're still important, but not as much as they were. Wastewater is an impediment to the town's growth. If a town doesn't grow, we don't need more escape routes. It's logical to leave Row Road on the plan because if money's already been earmarked as grant funding, we should not give it back. It also makes sense that we should at least design the new wastewater system before we start rebuilding the roads, that we don't end up restoring or improving a route just to tear it up again to install wastewater conveyance lines and infrastructure. It makes no sense. I'm a little surprised, though, that in this detailed recovery planning document, there's no mention of updating the town's general plan. Improving the escape routes cannot be fully planned unless one has a vision of what the town population is going to look like 5, 10, or 20 years from down the road, and where the growth is going to be concentrated geographically. Planning a comprehensive wastewater collection and treatment system should be designed with the ability to grow as the town's population expands. But if we don't know how and where it's going to grow, it leads to a lot of speculation and guessing. There's much here to consider today that we can have far-reaching effects on our town going forward. Yeah, I think these are all really important issues. But again, wastewater should be the priority, what we can afford in towns and escape routes next, and get that general plan up to date so that we don't make some more mistakes and build things that we don't need or ignore things that we do need. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
And we are working on general plan, correct? So that is being worked on.
Thank you.
Next card is Melissa Schuster.
We came together, that's how that works. Melissa Schuster. Woody, I want to thank you for your comments about where we were pre-fire, and I think it's really important that we remember that. Our struggle, our economy was the inverse of what most communities were, meaning that most communities are able to fund themselves through sales tax revenue. And we were the inverse. We did not have that type of commerce. We were struggling because we didn't have a sewer system. We still are. It was, I remember those 2008 and even just before the fire where former town manager used to say, and I used to tell her not to say this, but she used to say we had no money, no people, and no hope. And that is often how it felt. We were struggling. We got together and we said, okay, what can we do? And we came up with Measure C and Measure V. And that helped us greatly. We were able to buy 2 fire engines and add police, and those were the things that's how we were able to fund our public safety. So what I want to have you consider as we're looking at these is sort of a return on investment. The return on investment on evacuation routes at this point where the community is, with half the people that we had pre-fire, versus what are we going to need? What happens when the CBDG DR funds are gone? What happens when we don't have the money that we got from PG&E? We have got to make this community a vibrant community again, one that can sustain itself. And that can only be done with a wastewater system. Whatever that looks like, I think it's time for the community to take it back and say, this is something that we're going to figure out ourselves, and we're going to make this happen, even if we have to start small and do it in a way that we can add to it. But that's what we need to do. Thank you.
Warren Bullock.
All right. Good afternoon, Town Council, Mayor Crowder. Thank you guys for the opportunity to speak. I'm a local downtown business owner as well as a Lower Paradise resident, and today I'm speaking on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce as current president of the board. The Chamber sees the value and need for a sewer system in the downtown core area, as well as the community priorities for a safer and more accessible community. The importance of some type of a sewer system will not only build and benefit the commercial core, but is an incremental development issue where a sewer system will not only inspire growth in the business sector, but will also continue to grow the future residential construction, with residents choosing to build and live in a community that offers the services they want and need in their everyday lives. Keeping both of these prioritized should be of paramount importance, and as such, we would like to voice our support for option 2 or option B, whichever you want to look at, incorporates both of these priorities and keeps them paramount in the planning of our community. I don't envy your position in providing staff direction, as these are not easy decisions, and all of the projects on the table are very important, and there appears not to be enough funding to make all, or maybe even some of these projects come to full fruition. And I wanted to comment that I wrote a lot of this before I got to see Mark's presentation, and it was a lot of information, Mark. Personally, I'm a little saddened to see the potential of pushing off those bridges that I understand are huge expenses. But I feel like seeing those connections to both, well, the eventual connection all the way from Skyway to Pence is a good benefit for the community. But I do understand that these are very limited funds. It seems like big numbers, but it doesn't come close to what these estimates appear to be at this time. So once again, just want to reiterate our position as the chamber, and I appreciate all of you and what you do. Thank you very much.
John Ramaya.
Good evening, Council, or good afternoon, sorry, I'm used to it being at night. I think in options 1 and options 2, in scaling some of the evacuations routes back is a realistic thing to do. Bridges are expensive. There's also some other options in there. Take Bennett and push it into Newland, very short distance up there, would help. It wouldn't be the best solution because you're taking people back into town. There's also, and I don't know if I'm in favor of this or not, but there's Anchor Way that could be done with a 10 to 12% grade with an 8x8 box culvert, 60 foot long, going over the creek, or maybe 8x12. There's a lot of options, but I do have one concern about the sewer. And that is, as of right now, I've heard between 1.75% and 2.5% of sales tax goes to the town. Everybody's looking at this sewer as this saving grace for the town. If you start amortizing what you're gonna get, you're talking billions of dollars of sales to pay for it. The other thing you've gotta think is Edgewood, South Libby, Sawmill, some of those roads down in there, because of the state fire regulations, nothing can be done that increases the density down there until you have another way out. That opens up a lot of property to development. I don't know what he's got in mind, but Chuck Horning is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars right this very minute doing major vegetation management down there. He's got very large masticators along with small masticators in there. He's burning every day. I think Chuck's probably got something in mind. I don't know what, but he usually doesn't spend money without having an idea. But we need to do something to tie those three streets together, and maybe even on the other side, and I hate to say this, push it down to Stearns. I know Stearns is a nightmare. It's almost as bad as Honey Run, but at least it gives a little more out. And the last thing I have to say is Caltrans road development plan and directions say that typically if you can't do what you want, move towards it in a way of construction. Whether it's a double penetration chip seal or triple penetration chip seal instead of asphalt, or maybe it has a little more bends in it that can be straightened out later. Keep that in mind, that there are other options, and be careful with the sewer. Maybe some cluster systems that serve 1 or 2 acres down there, and see how those 1 or 2 acres, when they have sewer, develops, and then go into a big thing. I mean, 2-acre cluster systems can be built fairly economically compared to a total sewer system. We need a test project. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Barbara Bowen.
I'm the mayor, town council. I am a Paradise resident now since 1991. Lived on Edgewood Lane. This has always been a rural town. It's not a concrete jungle. It's not sidewalks. It's what it's been, okay? Lives over sewer. We don't have our shopping center where Safeway's back yet. We don't have our hospital. We need these things. We need to put lives over business, profit, greed, and sewer. Yeah, because my neighbors died, and I almost died. I don't know what Row Road was like the day of the fire, but I was stuck in that gridlock on Pearson. Saved 2 lives. So please, the people, the lives, there's gotta be more evacuation routes. It was a chaotic mess. Now, Row Road, I don't know if it was gridlocked, but we also have property on the backside of Edgewood, Stearns, 1798 Stearns. So I am very familiar with, how bad that road is. But it wouldn't have been an option on November 8th, 2018. You've got to put lives over greed, sewer, and business, please. This is a rural town. You want an urban jungle? Go to Chico. Thank you.
Alma Green.
Good afternoon, Council. I'm Alan Green, local citizen and a member of the Paradise Citizens Alliance. I want to thank you for your courtesy this afternoon. I want to thank Mark for an excellent presentation. It's very enlightening. But I'd like to suggest, given that it sounds like you're on a tight timeline, that Mark indicated that this is going to be your agenda item for decision-making on April the 8th, I'd like to request on behalf of Paradise Citizens Alliance that this PowerPoint be sent to us so that we can look at this and maybe come back to you with some objectivity and input offered to you on April the 8th, because there are some ideas that you've seen in this PowerPoint that I think are worth another citizen group to look at and come back to you with some suggestions. So, thank you.
You know, I don't disagree with you, Al. It would have been nice to get the PowerPoint in addition to my agenda packet.
So just for everybody's knowledge that town council PowerPoints are now being added to the website. And so they will be there within a week of the meeting, as soon as we can put them up. But normally it's the day after. But they are under agendas and minutes, and then you will see the PowerPoint presentation. So those are on the website now. The next card is for Bill Hartley.
Good afternoon, Town Council. I'm here representing business in our community. I'm a business owner. I'm also a retired Paradise police officer. I served our community for 20 years. I know the importance of a thriving community so that we can have fantastic services in our community. Without the revenues from business and from tourism, we're not able to support these services. That is part of the safety of our community, is providing fire and police protection as well as helping our schools out. It's not about businesses being greedy. It's all about public safety in the long run, revenues for the town. As a business owner, I see how we can help the town by providing services here locally versus having people drive down the hill and spending their money down there, and we have no revenues when they do that. If we provide a nice wastewater system to our community, build up our business district, we can build up the revenues to help the entire town with the infrastructure that we're talking about. So I hope you would consider that, and I thank you for the opportunity to let me speak with you.
Thanks, Bill.
Kathleen White.
Good afternoon. My name's Kathleen White. My concern is very small. We are on a private road of about 10 parcels. It's been private for about 50-plus years. It used to be called East Row Road. And for the last 2 years, I've been trying to get some information from the town because it has been the only route shown on the maps in the city going right through our dead-end 0.2 mile road. I have gotten very few answers. I've told it it's not made in steel, but yet it's still on Phase 1 map as going through from Edgewood or however it is you're going through there. But our concern is there's about 10 parcels. We're right next to Horning's acreage. Nobody wants a through road through there. We're secure. It's quiet. We don't have traffic. We don't have crime. We all have cameras. And I just gotten no answer in 2 years. So it's really frustrating today to see that Phase 1 may still be considered, but there is still a paved road going in front of our 10 parcels. I would just like to have that answered at some point. The other point to that is we have been told through the grapevine, but that if the owners of the majority do not want this road in front of their homes, that it would be done through eminent domain. And there is one home that if they do put newly built, we've got 2 houses on the road. One, ours is existing, it survived the fire. 1 brand new built, 3, another person who bought a lot and has gone in, and a neighbor who is now building on the road, all thinking they bought on this private road. All were not told by real estate agents or anybody else that this road in the city, if you went and looked at it, has a 2-lane road going right down in front of our homes, and the 1 house that's going to go right in front of their porch. So I would just like at some point to relax and hope that they find another way from Edgewood through Phase 1 to get to South Libby, which, by the way, if they bring our road to South Libby, there's a very 90-degree turn right there to go down the rest of Bennett, which is actually Point B. But at one point, this was East Row Road. My parents have been there for 55 years. They're not coming back. He's 92 years old. He's not going to rebuild. But it was East Row Road when they moved on it. Then it became Bennett. But most of Bennett is city road, and our piece of Bennett is still private. We still have to maintain it. We still have all the private road benefits and costs. So that's, I would just like to see them route it somewhere else. Thank you.
Next card is John Stonebreaker.
Thanks to the council for bringing this to the public ahead of time. It's very nice to have this input considered. Again, I don't live in town limits, but I'm a part of this community. I do shop here and certainly would like to see more services available here in the town. I'd like to see the town continue to be able to pay its bills. So I'm concerned that if you attempt to build the Forest Hill Bridge across Dry Creek here in Paradise, it's not just the initial cost, but there's also going to be a cost to upkeep something like that. And we see all of these cost estimates. We don't really see any revenue estimates. So with a lot of these roads, they're not necessarily going to bring in any additional tax base or revenue to the town in the same way that the wastewater project would. So I do think that that is the top priority, is trying to make the town fiscally sustainable once all these one-time funds disappear. So we'd like to see a number of dollars allocated to the wastewater project, but it doesn't mean you have to spend every possible dollar on it. There are probably more efficient ways than spending $400 million on it. I agree with the suggestion of using the Anchor Bennett connection over to Lava Creek. There's also like existing right-of-way that goes that way. You don't have to go directly west once you get across the ravine. I don't think it's rational to go all the way to the terminus of some of these dead-end roads, because the further downhill you go, the steeper and deeper the ravines get. So there's ways to interconnect these roads if you do need to accommodate the current state minimum fire safe regulations to make some of these properties buildable. Right now, if it's a certain distance beyond the last turnoff, they'll say they won't give you a building permit at all. Where, RCRC is trying to fight that. We don't know they'll be successful. So I think that scaling down the road extension to some degree, trying to connect directly across somewhere near Lava Creek over to Anchor, and then just over to Edgewood, but not all the way across Dry Creek to Pence, is probably the best way to use the funds that you already have allocated to you. I do agree that there's a need for this, whether it needs to be gated or something else under normal circumstances. And I agree with Councilmember Colton that the sort of evacuation chaos that experienced here in 2018 is unlikely to recur, given all of the work that the town has done since then, having more modern buildings to Chapter 7AA compliance. It's definitely less of a priority now than it would have been before. And we do want to see the interconnectivity, but it can't be the overriding consideration. And, again, some of these active transportation projects are limited to those purposes, like the ridiculous 20th Street Bridge. We want to see, as somebody who bikes through your town all the time, certainly Pence Road needs some help, and Oliver Curve needs some help. I don't know that Neal Road needs the same degree of help, in that they sort of have a painted bicycle gutter on the county portion that really isn't necessary given the amount of traffic that incurs. So it might be better to allocate those funds somewhere more within town to help the interconnectivity within town rather than essentially a purely recreational use for people coming up from Chico or going down to Chico after coming up Honey Run Road. So I want to emphasize that, you know, we appreciate that you are considering public input, and of the options, option 2 is least bad, though I would reiterate, possibly the Pence Road traffic signal could be postponed. Thanks.
Doug Taylor?
Hi. My name's Doug Taylor. I used to live up here 5 years ago before the fire. And we moved away after the fire and waited about 5 years to come back. I had searched for property for many, many months, ended up buying a piece of property on Bennett Road. And me and my wife love it. I was very fortunate a couple of months to, I think, talk to Mark and Miss Lang here, and they explained about the railroad project and what was going to be happening. I'm only one person. Everything that was said here today was great, and it's all going to come down to obviously money. I'm just hoping that maybe there might be a point where you folks can consider bypassing that particular piece of road on Bennett. I know there are a number of folks that have bought property there. I know a lot of people up Bennett that were not told, that have recently purchased property. There were no, and I understand, as I was talking to the councilwoman here, and Mark, there's no way that we could have been told that there was going to be a road. But the reason that myself and many of my friends have purchased that property was because it was a private road. And it's zoned agriculture. I can look out on my property, there's horses walking down the road. And I know I'm only one individual, and there are many individuals on that road that are on that road because of that reason. The sewer system, the evacuation, lives, wanting to expand the town is wonderful. Everybody has a priority, and there has to be compromises. And I think from listening to you, Mr. Mayor, and you, Mr. Vice Mayor, today, it's all going to come down to money. And if you have to cut corners somewhere, you're going to have to cut corners. So anyway, I just wanted to just voice that, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have no more cards.
So you're looking for direction, right?
That's correct. General direction, again, to keep momentum in the work, to prepare for budget, and to coordinate with implementation on any sort of changes. We really do recommend bringing it back in April.
So can I ask a couple questions?
Yes.
Your Neil Road pathway, that's just the bikeway, the bike path.
That's correct.
That's not the road.
No,
Is
well,
that-
the road is being redone at the same time with our Federal Highways Emergency Relief Program. We'll repave the road, but there will be no widening of Neil Road, no turn
Okay.
lane on Neil.
Okay.
Neil.
Is that project tied to some funds that we'll lose if we don't use it there?
Correct. If we were to forego the Neil Road project, I will just pull up this one. We have 12.9 million in secured funds through the Active Transportation Program.
For that project?
For that project.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So the other question is, Forest Road, the Forest Road one.
Forest Service Road?
Forest Lane. That gives us, with our fire department, a way to go either direction on that road, correct?
It would.
So is that tied to any funding that we will lose or not?
It is not.
Okay.
There's no leveraging funds for this one.
Okay. That one to me seems like a no-brainer because of the fact we get to move fire trucks and stuff very quickly through the town. I mean, to me, that seems like a critical one that needs to happen. If we're tied to Neil Road, that's fine. If we weren't, I was going to say axe it, but it looks like we need to do that one. The one on Foster, I'm glad you have that out. I don't think the Foster, is that a signal you're putting there, Foster Black Olive?
So at this point, very little design work has actually been done on the Foster Black Olive, but what we've confirmed is that a roundabout will not work. There's a lot of different reasons for that. So it would lead to be, if we're going to do some geometrical realignment, a signal would be safest. But again, on the priority list, if we go back
Right, I agree with that.
to that
but
list,
not-
it's almost to the bottom.
Right, and
Yep.
I'm happy with that. So the only thing I would say on phase two that I'm trying to find a way to get more money to the sewer, take something out of this to go to the sewer, but still put forest in there. I see that as a priority that needs to happen, but, anyway.
It's not there.
Yeah, and so if I heard you correctly, and sorry, if I heard you correctly, if you were looking at alternative two, if we did not distribute this 20 million towards the sewer and instead we put 10 million here for Forest Service and 10 million for Oliver Curve at the reduced scope per council member.
I'm trying to find ways.
My brain, I'm sorry. Lassonde, I really am sorry about that. $10 million to each of those with nothing additional to the sewer, that's a
No.
viable alternative.
No, that's not I'm trying to get more money to the sewer. I'm trying to cut something out.
I see.
And get more money to the sewer.
Okay.
Whether that be taking, but it's not that much money. I mean, it's not enough to really help the signal up at Pence and Skyway. I don't know. I'm trying to get something out to put more money to the sewer. I like the 20 million in there. I want that to be 50 or 60 million.
Yeah, one of the things, I want to make a couple of comments. One of the things you said on some of these projects, like on the Row Road pieces, whatever they are, 1 or 2 or 1A or modified or whatever, the actual alignment has not been decided, correct?
That's correct. And
So the people that are concerned about their private, I understand what you've seen on some maps, but that actual alignment of how those roads, where they would actually be, has not been determined yet.
that's 100% correct.
So, okay, that's one thing.
Okay.
The other comment I wanted to make, the town has had a historical position on eminent domain that we would never use it, and we never have. That's just historical knowledge. And the other comment, and then during the fire, because I was in town and had to escape, every roadway in this town was gridlocked. That's reality. Whether we have this one extra road going east-west, if we ever have that kind of an event again, they will all be gridlocked again. So, but as far as Greg's point on, and I'll qualify this because I live on Forest Service Road.
Be careful.
It's a private lane. And the fire department is a state fire station that we work out of now because we have not rebuilt Fire Station 3 on Wagstaff. They already use that private road, as well as Parks and Rec for the ballparks, the horse arena, and the dog park. That private road is already utilized by public safety. What they were talking about, and was in Mark's report, was possibly it being a gated or limited to fire department only. What they have to do is go from the fire department across the bike trail onto Skyway. I have no objection to that. But on one of these things, these widening projects of any road, Pence or Forest Service Road or any of the others, you have the right, you were saying on Pence, there's right-of-way acquisitions of about 80 properties. You're taking, I have $15,000 worth of landscaping in my front yard. If you make that a public road and put a bike lane or just even I mean, you're going to run into there's costs there that we're not even being shown. We're being shown costs based on what we think it'd be with all of these unknowns. So in a year, 2 or 3 or 5, you're going to come back to us after the environmental studies are done, and we're liable going to be, Hell, we can't do that. We don't have any more money. Because eventually the money's gonna go away, like somebody mentioned. That's all.
I will just quickly note, that each of these projects has a budget for right-of-way acquisitions, and those types of issues where if there's landscaping or a special feature, our intent is partnership, and to make sure that there's compensation for those types of acquisitions. It's not just plowing through a road.
I just had a couple of comments. First of all, I wanted to thank everybody for coming today and sharing your position, because it's really important that we get as much input as we can from the community to make a decision. This is obviously a very complicated decision, and there's, of these alternatives listed or any other ones we could fabricate, we will not make everybody happy. I'm sure of that. However, I did want to point out a few things that I feel are important to consider here, some of which Woody mentioned earlier, that should we ever have another catastrophic event in this community, the efforts that the town has gone to mitigate those it's very significant. We have, done an incredible job on the fuels management and fuels reduction. We have all of the evacuation zone signs. We have all of the evacuation sirens in place, and just education on evacuation, and we have all of the increased WUI codes for building. So we will never be that recipe again. Is there a crystal ball that says we will or won't ever do, have an incident like that again? Unfortunately not. But with that said, I am confident that we need to look forward in our community. We need to quit looking back. We need to have a future, and that with that can be additional, evacuation considerations along the way. But if we don't expand our economic development to sustain our community, we won't have to worry about evacuation routes, because we will not grow. And I hope that someday we do have to worry about population density. I hope that is a concern someday, but it's not now or anytime in the near future. And we need to do whatever it takes, and whether it be one of these alternatives presented or a combination of those, we need to make the sewer or wastewater treatment, whatever that option looks like, we need to make that a priority for our funding so that we can attract businesses and retain and attract more residents to our community so that we can be viable and solvent. Thank you.
If I could, I too agree with the concept of the sewer, but my problem with the sewer right now is I don't know how much it's going to cost us. I don't have a design in front of me. I don't have a cost in front of me. I don't have anything in front of me other than a need or a wish, whatever category you're on. I realize you folks are off studying that, but allocating $20 million, you've talked about the different numbers that you can get from different places and all that. Again, I don't have an idea what that is, so it's hard to make a decision on how much we should move off of projects over to the sewer without knowing how much that sewer cost is, and whether the Corps of Engineers is going to come through with their money that you talked about at one time, or others. Again, I have no idea how much it's going to take, and so it's hard to decide how much we should cut from this to fund for that.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So Mark, can you, one more time for me on alternative 2?
Yes.
If we did the 1A and 1B, what we would actually save there in dollars?
So if we did Railroad Phase 1A and complete and follow through with Railroad Phase 2, we would be able to allocate additional $20 million to the sewer. We would be able to increase the funding for all of the other projects, as well as our match requirements. And then this is the listing of projects that would be suspended. Does that answer your question?
I agree with that one.
So on Pence, it shows it all the way down. We've already done the widening on a portion of it.
Right, I could have broken up
Flagstaff
that.
to
Yeah, the project cost, although there is widening a little bit, because only the section in front of the school is widened between Billy and Wagstaff. Everything else is still one lane. So there is the project cost in this area is less than the other areas.
So it's just okay, I see what you're saying.
Mark, didn't Pence Road to the town limits get damaged by the trucks and cleanup too?
Yeah, so
And
we
why
still
aren't we
have,
doing the rest of it?
we still have road rehab funds that are going to pave our portion of Pence, yes.
All
south
the
of
way down to
Pearson.
town limits?
Yes,
Okay,
correct,
cool.
but not widening,
Not widen it?
not widening.
You're gonna fill in the culverts?
No, no.
So, Mark, I would be okay with suspending Oliver Curve for a time, but I don't like, I mean, to me, the word indefinitely kind of means dead. Is
Yeah.
there,
Yeah, I certainly would agree until further notice, is not dead. But Oliver Curve, if we go back to the spreadsheet, again, prioritized council, or community objectives and council objectives, Oliver Curve is really the next highest one. Elliott Nunley, we're not going to find $50 million for Elliott Nunley. So that one would be the first one to be reinstated if funding becomes available. For example, if we get the build grant, that certainly makes sense. But I'm certainly glad to take some direction too. I heard this a little bit about trying to find, a reduced cost for the Oliver project and seeing if it can fit in there. But without reducing the sewer 20 million, that might be difficult as well. But as we go forward, if some of these project estimates come down, although that is yet to be seen, certainly we could augment accordingly for the Oliver Curve project.
thank you.
Well, to get this moving, I'm good with, I'll go with alternative 2. There's a couple of changes I'd make, but we don't have the money for it, so unless somebody finds it, I would say alternative 2 is what I would be happy with.
So if there's some direction, which it sounds like, what I can do is we will use alternative 2 to prepare a more formal action plan. You saw in your agenda packet, there was a lot of areas that need information filled in. So we'll assume alternative 2 and present that at the April meeting, go through the pros and cons and any other feedback that we were able to take from here to present to you at that time.
But, Mark, you're not able to, so that would be the modified
We would be modifying the Row Road Phase 1.
Not going to
Yes,
Pence. but
not going to
over.
Pence.
Okay, but you still, even when we come back in April meeting, we're not going to have clear routes defined, are we?
No, because each of these projects has its own environmental review process that will go through the pros and cons, the impacts and the benefits.
Which gives the private road people an opportunity to,
Yes,
to fight for what you want.
yes. And just to put a period at the end of that sentence on, this is kind of an example of what Phase 1A could look like, where you heard a lot of public feedback about extending Bennett Road. Well, there's an option for Keller Lane, Frontier, Wolf, Roy, Running Deer. All of these could be alternatives to that one. And I understand how we got here with the map showing what it showed. That's not a selected alternative.
So, Mark, just, and make it clear, I don't live on Oliver Road or near it. I'm near the Nunley end that's getting bounced, and that's okay.
We could route it through.
Yeah, no thanks. On the Oliver Curve, could we even do something really simple? Is there a way we could do K-rail there where you could walk on the other side of the K-rail? That would be certainly less than a $10 million project and improve it. Is that something that could be done?
Yeah, over the next 3 weeks, I will review kind of, if I hear the base objective to protect pedestrians around that corner while keeping costs to a minimum between Skyway and Valley View, I will present some options at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Woody.
A sidewalk close sign for $20 would solve it.
A lot of it is where that ends. The sidewalk comes down and it kind of has a path, and then it just ends into a ditch.
Yep.
I about took someone out a couple weeks ago, and I've driven that thing since the 60s, the 70s.
Yeah.
And I haven't driven it, I've been riding on it since then. But, there's always those ever so often, and it shocks you when you see them there. And then you have to make sure there's nobody, so it is a tricky one, but.
Yeah,
We can do something to at least,
So we have directional 2 seems to be. Anything else from us, Mark?
No, I just want to say thank you again, and thank you to everyone who came out and provided their input. What was shared in this room, literally all the perspectives have lived inside us as a staff for the last years. And to hear it expressed in such a thoughtful, articulate way really validates the work that we do and why we're doing this, because it is so important to our recovery. So I just want to say thank you to the council, thank you to the community for coming out. I feel like we have good direction to present your preferred option here at the next council meeting, and we'll take public comment on that again.
So I want to thank everybody for coming. It is really great to see people show up at our council meetings and get the input, because, you know, that's how we're supposed to be making decisions, and when you don't have an audience, it's hard to do that. So